Tánaiste, in my view, your government is waging a very thinly veiled stealth war against Irish neutrality, and that the move to remove the triple lock is part of that very conscious and deliberate campaign by this government to undermine our traditional neutrality. Can you please explain why you're getting rid of the triple lock, and is it not just clearly that a move to undermine Ireland's traditional neutrality and involve us in the wars of big powers?
Concorda number 9, 15, 44 and 45 together. And of course I'd reject that assertion, and that won't come as any surprise to Deputy Boyd Barrett. As set out in the programme for government, the government does intend to reform the triple lock legislation, whilst also ensuring that amendments to the legislation are in keeping with our values and our policy of military neutrality. And I really do hope, and I might be shouting into a black hole in relation to this, but I really do hope we can actually have a debate which can actually respect that we all want to maintain military neutrality, at least I do, the government does, you do, and actually have a discussion about the detail of the legislation around the triple lock. And I think simply conflating the two, I think, does a disservice to the men and women of Oakling na Heron. I think it does a disservice to our defence and security obligations as a country, and I think it does a disservice to peacekeeping and the role that our peacekeepers can play abroad, because you can be militarily neutral and also say that you don't believe the UN Security Council should have a veto on where your peacekeepers go. Those two things are absolutely, completely and utterly consistent with each other. You may have a different view, but that's my absolute view. Now, what I would say, and I said it to Deputy Gibney earlier, I want to engage constructively in this. I want to get the legislation right, but I do not believe the current legislation in relation to the triple lock is fit for purpose. And I do believe, and I've said very clearly, that amendments I bring forward will want to keep with our values and our policy of military neutrality. So please don't tell the people of Ireland that I'm wishing to get rid of military neutrality. That is not my position. Don't misrepresent me, don't misrepresent my party, and don't misrepresent the government of Ireland. The triple lock, though, does set out a number of mechanisms in relation to how Irish troops, may participate in overseas peace support operations. I believe a new process is needed to replace the current system that underpins the deployment of Irish troops abroad, because that does effectively allow the UN Security Council members to bind Ireland's hands in its international engagement by veto or by a threat of veto. The previous government had approved the drafting of the general scheme to amend legislation on how we deploy our troops overseas for peacekeeping, but also for other purposes, including evacuating operations of Irish citizens abroad. And it's been many times in this House, deputies have rightly highlighted important issues about how we get our people, our citizens, not troops, back from overseas in times of great danger and in a volatile geopolitical situation. The next step now is to present draft heads of legislation to Cabinet, to publish them, and then let's go to an Oireachtas committee, if and when we can get these set up quickly. Let's go to an Oireachtas committee and let's scrutinise this and get it right.
Yeah. Thank you. I don't trust Fianna Fáil and Fine Gael with Irish neutrality. And, for example, the Department of Defence has just contracted a US defence agency based in the Pentagon in order to redesign the Irish Defence Forces. On the blurb on their website, they say this company, this US Pentagon-based company, is grounded in, quote, American values, maybe the values of Donald Trump, as he's put out the video you may have seen about Gaza and statues of Trump and dollar signs being made by Trump in Gaza. Or should we trust you, given the fact that millions of US troops have been allowed to go through Shannon Airport, a neutral country, to prosecute wars in Iraq, in Afghanistan, the fact that you have involved us in PESCO and the EU militarization project, which is in turn aligned with NATO, dominated by the United States, by Germany and Britain? Why would we trust you with neutrality?
I mean, to come in here, Deputy Connolly, and talk about that I don't have the trust and respect of the Irish people. I got elected to Dáil Éireann, same day as you. So did my colleagues. Together we formed a majority of the people's representatives. We put in our manifesto that if we were elected to government, we were going to reform the triple lock. We told the Irish people before the election. So we don't need any caustic remarks that if people in this House don't like the way we vote, that somehow or other we've lost the trust and respect. I wouldn't accuse you of losing the trust and respect. And I have the trust and respect of my constituents. And it's been just renewed a couple of months ago. And we formed a government. This is democracy in action. It's not just democracy if you like the outcome. And we don't need a citizens' assembly. We have one. Here it is. This is the Citizens' Assembly, the place, the national parliament, where the men and women elected by citizens of this country get sent to debate and discuss issues. And if we could do it in a respectful manner, I think it would be very productive. There's a number of times, I think Deputy O'Leary asked a valid question. I get asked a lot. I'm going to run out of time now, but I'd like to say it in the next answer in relation to, am I okay? Oh, I have another bit, sorry, because there was a couple of, thank you, I'm trying to answer the question. So, in relation to, there have been a number of occasions already where I believe the current security veto, I want to say that it's not UN, it's the UN Security Council veto. It's the Vladimir Putin veto that actually has a real ability. Vladimir Putin has no right to say where men and women of Oakland and Heron go on peacekeeping missions. None whatsoever. Anyway, I won't comment on his elections, but he certainly wasn't elected to this stall. And there have been a number of times. For example, in 1999, where a permanent member of the UN Security Council vetoed the renewal of the United Nations Preventative Deployment Force, as a subsequent EU peace operation in the former Yugoslav Republic of Macedonia did not have a Security Council mandate. Ireland wanted to participate, but we were unable to participate that. More recently, in 2015, the EU established a security mission in the Mediterranean known as Operation Sophia. The mission didn't have a UN mandate until 2016. As a result, Ireland was delayed participating by over a year. The same concerns as regards Operation Althea have since arisen, where a potential UN Security Council member veto would have resulted in Ireland having to withdraw from the mission. And finally, in 2017, the Maritime Analysis Operations Centre on Narcotics, which is an international maritime intelligence centre supported by the EU, requested a naval service ship to assist with maritime drug interdiction operations. And although Ireland is an extraordinarily strong supporter of that centre, and indeed was one of the founding members of the centre, a ship couldn't be sent there because there wasn't a UN Security Council mandate. There are real challenges here. We should work through them in a sensible, respectful manner.
Deputy Boyd
Barrett. The point of the UN part of the triple lock is that we do not deploy troops in conflicts between the big imperial powers. So you're right, Putin is a nasty imperialist aggressor. But isn't it interesting that you don't call Trump a nasty imperialist aggressor when he's just said to the Ukrainians, we might consider, giving you a few weapons, but only if you give us all those raw materials in your country, or while he's trying to do a real estate deal on top of the broken bones and bodies of the victims of genocide in Gaza. You don't mention him as an imperialist. Or the German Chancellor, who's inviting Netanyahu, a wanted war criminal, to Germany, who are also involved in NATO. You don't mention them. And that's the truth of it, because you want to get rid of the triple lock so we can deploy Irish troops to get involved in conflicts headed up by military alliances dominated by the United States, by Britain, by Germany, people who are every bit potentially and often in reality
as Catherine Connolly.
Look, I agree with Deputy Connolly on this. We should continue, and we do continue to champion the UN and champion reform of the UN. I fully agree on that. I'm a huge believer in international law and the workings of the United Nations. And at a time when that is under threat from others who are looking inwards, who don't believe in multilateralism, we should be even louder in our promotion. I don't disagree on that. But I also recognise the reality, as I'm sure you do, that UN Security Council reform isn't exactly forthcoming from some of the permanent members of the UN Security Council. I've been very clear, Deputy Boyd Barrett, I've given specific examples on the record of this House as to where I would have liked to see Irish troops be able to assist in various missions that are in line with military neutrality that they couldn't because of the current reality. I've put them on the record of the House. You can go back and scrutinise them, check them out. They're the examples, and I have a longer list I can provide to you as well. I've also, by the way, been very clear on our position in Ukraine. And we'll have a debate on Ukraine immediately after these parliamentary questions. And I think everybody knows, from President Zelensky down, the support and solidarity that the Irish government and the people of Ireland have provided to Ukraine. And others can have their position on Ukraine. Ireland and the European Union has our position. I spent Sunday and Monday with European foreign ministers working extraordinarily hard to make sure we backed, in a unified way, the Ukrainian UN resolution, and we did. And we deviated from the US, and we proudly deviated in terms of standing up for our values and not amendments or resolutions that didn't recognise Russia as the aggressor and the importance of the UN Charter. I think we'd be having a really interesting debate in this House if there was a conversation about what should be in the content of the legislation to amend the triple lock. But I find it underwhelming and disappointing that at a time when I'm giving you real examples of real challenges that have been faced by the men and women of the Defence Forces, you're not saying let's tease through these. Well, you mustn't have been listening, but I'll give them again in a second. I will give them again in a second. I gave you them now. I gave you them. Do you want them again? Do you want them again? The United Nations Preventative Deployment Force in 1999. 2015, the Mediterranean operation known as Operation Sophia. The Maritime Analysis Operation Centre Narcotics Mission. Operation Althea. And indeed a UN authorisation for a Unifor Operation Althea in Bosnia-Herzegovina that we nearly had to miss out on too. They're examples. So I hope you heard me that time because I've already given them. But let me give them again. But maybe you don't want to hear because you don't want to engage. You want to jump up and say, Fine Gael and Fianna Fáil want to get rid of military neutrality. No, we don't. And you mightn't trust us. But let me assure you, the people of Ireland, when they went out to vote in the election, do not trust people before profit with our foreign policy or our defence policy.
Given that there's 3 deputies, you have the opportunity to come back in for a minute each, if you wish.
Yeah. Every single opinion poll has shown the majority of people are in favour of neutrality. Whatever. Yeah.
One person.
And they also, in their hundreds of thousands, protested, for example, about decisions of previous Fianna Fáil, Fine Gael governments to allow millions of US troops go through Shannon Airport to assist US-UK-led wars in Iraq and Afghanistan, where hundreds of thousands of people were slaughtered based on lies put out by the US. Yous allowed that. Why would we trust you? Why would we trust you when you have NATO generals, at least twice in the last couple of years, down overseeing our troops in Cork? Why would we trust you when you have a US Pentagon-based contractor just employed by the Department of Defence, imbued with US values, to redesign our defence forces? Why would we trust you when you're involving us with the PESCO alliance, which is aligned with NATO, dominated by the US, the UK, France and Germany, some of the biggest imperial powers with brutal records of warmongering? Why would we trust you?
And Tánaiste Conley.
I'm having a kind of out-of-body experience here because I'm in favour of Irish neutrality. The Government of Ireland is in favour of Irish neutrality. The Government of Ireland values Irish neutrality, and I spend a significant amount of my working week now travelling the world explaining to colleagues, to partners, to counterparts why we value Irish neutrality. But you know what else I also value? This place. The democratic mandate of the men and women who get elected to Dáil Éireann in terms of decisions in relation to our defence forces. And the idea of seconding that out to anybody else is ludicrous in itself. The idea of seconding it out to anybody else that includes Vladimir Putin is downright illogical. And we need to be able to have a sensible debate where we publish legislation, which none of you have even seen yet. You're all against what you haven't seen yet. We need to then send it to an Oireachtas committee, and we need to then scrutinise it. And I welcome Deputy O'Leary at least being willing to do that. I take the point about, you know, how were people in favour of the triple lock at one moment in time and not now, but I would respectfully say the world has changed. I mean, there was a time we used to invite Russian presidents to this country and shake their hands and welcome them and engage. He's now invading a country on the continent of Europe. The context has changed. And in terms of the defence and security obligations that we have an obligation to do that. And on the OTB, as again, I don't wish to be misrepresented, I have spent all of Monday in Brussels at an EU-Israel association agreement where, Deputy Connolly, not only have we not made progress, we've made progress. We have actually agreed unanimously as 27 member states to language that I think even you might be very supportive of in relation to the differentiation between the State of Israel and the illegally occupied territories. That's what our incredible diplomats, our incredible civil servants, aided and assisted and directed by the Irish government to manage to achieve at an EU level this week in terms of the importance of a two-state solution, standing up for UNRWA, providing more money for UNRWA, standing up for our international courts, standing up for international law, and differentiating when it comes to trade between the illegally occupied territories of what should make up the state of Palestine and differentiating between that of the state of Israel.
Moving on to question 10, which has been taken alongside question 40, so Tánaiste Daly.
I'd like to ask the Tánaiste Minister of Defence, in the context of Storm Éowyn, the specific protocols and contingency plans in place to ensure Defence Forces assistance in future natural disasters, the criteria that are used to determine Defence Forces deployment in such emergency situations, and if you will make a statement on the matter. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Cahirlach, and thank you very much to Deputy Daly for raising this important and timely question in the aftermath of Storm Éowyn, something that I know brought so much devastation to so much of our country, and indeed particularly perhaps to your own part of the country in terms of the west and the northwest region as well. So at the outset, Cahir, I really would like to take the opportunity on the record of this House to recognise the contribution made by our civil defence units and by our defence forces in helping those worst affected by the recent storm. As Tánaiste, as Minister for Defence, as their Minister, I want to thank them for their service and for all that they have done. I'm particularly grateful to the civil defence volunteers who were unstinting in supporting their local communities. I had the opportunity with Deputy David Maxwell to visit the civil defence in Monaghan and see firsthand what those volunteers were undertaking. And yet again, it was a reminder, I think, to all of us in this House and to people right across the country that we collectively owe the volunteers of the civil defence a huge debt of gratitude. In relation to the Defence Forces, while they're not the primary response agency for non-security related emergencies, they do, of course, where requested, provide assistance to the appropriate lead department in the event of a natural disaster or emergency situation in their aid to civil authority role. With regard to Storm Éowyn, the Defence Forces received an accommodated request for assistance under GTF mechanisms from a number of agencies, and they did provide assistance ranging from air patrols of electricity lines by the Air Corps, their readiness to support the National Ambulance Service. They provided accommodation for prison staff during the red warning phase. They provided provision and transportation of equipment and supplies, notably generators, to the affected areas. My colleagues in government and I are very mindful of the impact of this storm, and indeed looking to the future, we've made it very clear to the state service providers that any lessons learned must be incorporated into future planning and to the development of the necessary resilience to minimise such impacts should a comparable weather event occur of this magnitude again. I understand that the review process will be led by the Department of Housing and Local Government, and my own department, through the Office of Emergency Planning, will engage in the same. I should say just finally, Cahir, I suppose, and again, probably understanding the frustration of a lot of your constituents, Deputy Daly, who may have been without power and water supply for significant periods of time. In relation to this storm, I suppose a lot of the technical expertise that was required may not have been expertise readily available to the Defence Forces, but was available to other agencies. But we were trying in every opportunity possible to provide practical assistance in terms of transporting of equipment, providing accommodation, and like I say, the civil defence very much being on the ground, helping those, particularly those most vulnerable members of communities.